How did you, as a family, deal with asset management? You need high quality asset management, and those who don't do it well can get into a mess.
I think particularly for properties in lower income or higher crime areas, you don't get a lot of people that want to manage properties.
Right.
Even if we wanted to hire a third party person, it probably wouldn't go so well because they want to manage in that area. They're going to charge a way higher percentage because of the extra work. So I think that was a smart decision at the beginning of buying these properties in 2005 to say we're going to manage everything in house because he understood that dynamic of how much you're going to give away if you hire somebody else, and can they even do a high quality job.
Welcome to the Wild West Real Estate Podcast. And now, here's your host, Mark Hinteman. Today's guest is the CEO of Web City Properties, a family-owned and operated real estate investment firm focused on single-family rentals, value-add multifamily, and residential development in Southern Dallas. I'd like to welcome Jordan De Silva.
How's it going, Mark? Appreciate you having me on.
Hey, great to have you on. I'm looking forward to jumping into your story, specifically, what an amazing background. You're like a generation ahead of the rest of us who have sort of jumped into on the real estate bandwagon. You've been doing it for a generation, and you've now got an impressive family business.
Yeah, I've been fortunate, and certainly, it's a snapshot of what I'm sure a lot of the people that are getting into real estate now could foresee for their children. So certainly fortunate to be in the position I'm in.
Yeah, that's amazing. Can you tell me a little bit about what's the story? Does that get passed down in your family of great grandpa or grandpa?
Yeah, it really starts with my dad. He was you have somebody in that family that changed the trajectory of that family's history at some point in time, whether that goes back 1,000 years or just 20 to 30 years, right? So
Yeah.
my dad, he came from India, was born in Goa, India, and moved to Mumbai when he was kind of a teenager. Really grew up in a poor background, never really had a lot of people that showed him the way and showed him that he could be more than what he was born into. But he had aspirations for achieving the American dream, even while in India. He would go to the embassy and read about all the things happening in America, and he would dream that one day he could be there and doing great things for himself as well. And his father died when he was 16, so he was working full time at age 16 while supporting the family and going to school. And eventually, by the grace of God, he was able to move with his brothers to California, actually. So he actually went to Indiana first, got a couple of years of college there, and then went to Los Angeles, and that's kind of where he made his mark. His first position was actually as a manufacturing company CEO and owner, and then he realized that all his next door neighbors that were driving Mercedes were in real estate. So he was wait a second.
These are in LA, the neighbors.
In LA.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like, hey, wait a second.
Just to interject, I loved your opening statement, whatever that was. It was something like, in many of these families, there's one relative way back that changed the trajectory of the family's future for generations to come. That's amazing.
Yeah, so he was that guy. And so, long story short, he got into real estate, and his thesis was really to do what other people were not willing to do, go to areas where people were not willing to invest. So he went to actually Compton, was one of the primary first places where he started investing, kind of the Inland Empire as well, in investing in mobile home parks, multifamily, more distressed assets. And then eventually he sold out of that in 2005, and we came to Dallas, and he started doing single family properties. He really wanted to transition from more of those larger properties, having outside investors, to being able to do everything in house. And of course, that was right after and during the financial crisis. So sold out in that 2005 to 2008 timeframe, and then really started investing in single family homes here in the Southern Dallas area, kind of the more lower income areas. And his model would be to buy, rehab, and then seller finance to buyers who couldn't get conventional loans. So
Okay.
in a roundabout
Interesting.
way, it was an impactful model where he was able to build a great business. He was able to reduce his downside risk in a time in which people were more, bearish on the real estate market as a whole. And he was able to provide home ownership opportunities to people who would normally have them. So that
Yeah.
was our business for about 15 years. And unfortunately, he passed away in 2020. I
Okay.
took over and we started doing more long-term rentals. And then over really the last year and a half is when we started getting into multifamily and development. And that's where we're
Okay.
at today, working on that in the DFW area.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. And your father's trajectory, it rang familiar for me. Like, I came to LA with no money, trying to get into the entertainment industry. And yeah, like you talk about your dad going into Compton and just all the rough areas, the Inland Empire, because that's where I was buying the cheapest possible buildings. I just wanted an asset, and it
Yeah.
didn't have, I couldn't afford any nice assets, but sounds like it's probably a familiar road for people not only in LA, but like, anywhere, just trying to get into the real estate space. You got to acquire some probably rough properties in rough neighborhoods, and
Yeah.
it's good experience cutting your teeth on those.
Yeah. And at that point, you kind of, when you're coming from the background he came from, none of that was scary to him. He wasn't going to get
Right.
scared off by gangs or areas that were, high crime. He wasn't going to get scared off by anything.
Yeah, that's funny. I interviewed somebody, that I was friends with out here that invested in some of the really rough neighborhoods, and she was an older lady, and she said that the gangs would protect her. There was
Really,
their gang territory, but like they knew her, so she was always protected, which I thought was pretty funny.
that's amazing. Yeah. I mean, if I think if you're looking at it and, obviously we all say rough or lower income but really if you look at it in the sense that these are all just other people that are human beings trying to make a living and live fruitfully, then it kind of changes your outlook on that area. And if you really try to be intentional in investing in that area, which we'll talk about I'm sure later during our time together, then it helps your ability to make friends, and people will protect you, gangs will protect you, because you're looking at the neighborhood not as just something you can extract value from, but you're looking at it as something that is, part of your identity as well.
Yeah, yeah, so that's cool. So yeah, what did you? I'm sorry, maybe right as you were kind of telling your story, you got into some areas that I want to kind of stop and, you know, could you go through what was the trajectory? So you were in like Southern LA, Inland Empire, acquiring multifamily primarily initially.
Yeah, my dad was he was acquiring multifamily properties in the Inland Empire. That was the majority of where he was working at. I know he
Okay.
initially had started in Compton as well, but really was more investing in that Inland Empire, single family houses, multifamily houses, mobile home parks, a variety of larger assets.
Could you, about what era was that? Like what years was that? Was that in the 90s maybe?
Yeah, during the 80s and 90s.
80s and 90s. Okay. Because
Yeah.
Inland Empire was kind of nothing in the 80s. And I got out here in the 90s. So I'm speaking maybe not as the most informed guy. But even when I arrived out here, Inland Empire was pretty desolate, and it was like meth, a good place to go
Yeah.
get some drugs or something. But it's changed dramatically. I drove through there last weekend, and it's now not off the radar
Yeah.
in terms of like its growth. So I think there are a lot of investors interested in those kind of areas, as
Yeah.
always
And
happens, the
if he would
worst
have held
areas.
everything in that area, can you imagine the amount of profits we would have had if we hold for 30 years? I think it just
Right.
kind of it speaks to, you know, certain markets as a whole, right? Texas is another example. I think if you look at certain areas that maybe even 10 years ago, it's the same trajectory of where no one would want to live in that area, but now there's suddenly places that have, luxury everything, and certainly are a place for investors to hold long term.
Yeah. As we're having this conversation, I'm reminded of an investor who was really smart. I think he was both an attorney and a doctor. I don't know how you do both of those.
You go to school for 2 decades doing that.
Right. His father was a big investor, a real estate investor, and he moved, he started in LA, got kind of priced out of LA, moved east and went into the Inland Empire. And he bought his biggest investment to date, which was like a 200 unit and I forget that, like the tiny town in the Inland Empire. And most of his tenants were military, and the military pulled out maybe like 4 months after, 5 months after he bought. And he said he was running like $200,000 negative every month. And he walked away like that's the disaster story,
Wow.
family story of
Yeah.
it is his father, like maybe in his 50s, lost everything. It sort of caused a domino effect, and he never invested again.
Wow.
And he said as a kid, his lesson, don't invest in this specific, I can't remember the specific town. It was like a really tiny town at the foot of the San Bernardino Mountains, like
Goodness.
Upland or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Wow.
yeah.
Well, I know my dad he actually did experience some distress himself during the savings and loan crisis. But I
Okay.
think the difference with him and other people is that despite having some failures, it wasn't everything great. He was able to get back up and still go out there and build other companies and invest in other assets, and sold out of everything eventually and come to Dallas. So he didn't get
Yeah.
scared off by real estate failures. He just had to revise his strategy, and which is why he didn't want to bring in any external investors and do smaller assets. So he limited his risk. That was kind of his response to some of the failures he had in California.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And that was just harsh luck and a harsh
Yes,
oversight that, they didn't take into account that there was probably rumbles of the military pulling out of there before he bought it. But, maybe the prior seller knew that, and that's why they were selling.
that's selling out. Yeah,
But
which is a little bit,
sketchy, a
sketchy,
little
right?
bit questionable
Exactly. But
disclosures wise.
yeah, if you can get out of those and still be okay enough where you can go out and still survive and go out and
Right.
invest again, that's always the goal. But those things, when they happen, 200K deficit every month, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
that's just,
rough.
you
That's
can't,
rough.
it's hard to get away from that. But let's talk about your, successes. There's lots to be learned from failure, obviously. But yeah, it sounded like could you walk us through like the path? So you were investing in multifamily, and then did you start to get into various aspects while you were in California, or was this all when you moved to Texas?
Yeah. So once he sold out of his, he still kept some single family and land and a couple other assets in California, but sold out mostly during that. We moved in 2005 to Dallas, and kind of that 3-year period before the crash is when he was able to sell out of mostly everything he had in California, and then
Okay.
transition to buying high volume single family properties in the Dallas area. So, timing is what it is, right? It's hard to time things up, but he did it pretty perfectly. From being
Yeah.
successful myself, selling out right before the crash and then having all this capital to infuse and buying single family volume in Dallas at, pennies on the dollar. So
Right. Cause that was,
pretty good.
2000, 2005 through eight in beyond. Yeah. You had massive foreclosures and
Yeah.
vacant homes that you could pick up for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the success of that was really just the timing of it. And I don't know that he could have predicted it. I think it just kind of happened. But luckily, when you're in that position, it's important to take advantage of it, right? And be
Right.
well capitalized. And I think that's what led to his success was just having a focused strategy after exiting from California, knowing exactly how he wanted to make his money in Dallas, having certain areas that he had researched. So the focus element, I think, is what I attribute a lot to his success, besides just the good timing.
Yeah, and you could chalk that up to luck, but he was clearly prepared and he had a plan. And I'm sure he went through bad luck like we all, as if you're investing as long as your father did,
Oh yeah.
you go through very rough markets as well as some very positive markets. That one was a very rough market, and he was able to turn it around into an opportunity. So, yeah, it's not, there's always going to be various factors in any market, but he was able to look for the opportunities in them.
And I think too, you look at everyone kind of talks about recession proofing your business plan or your portfolio, by investing in some of these lower income areas. And also being protected on the downside by selling it as a note, you are kind of recession proofing your business, because in recessions, people that are living in A and B class sometimes have to go down to C and D class. And so you're going to always have demand for your properties. And then, of course, because you're selling a lot of the properties and owner financing them, you're carrying back the note. So if the values do go down, you're still protected by the value of the note. So he
Right.
certainly was, I think, in a way, smart in really recession proofing every aspect of the model.
Yeah. I mean, recession proofing it. Did he ever go through an era where he was carrying the note and, a lot of the notes went bad?
Really started this model right at the end of last recession, right? So we really haven't had a period of recession in the last decade plus.
Okay, sure.
So in that case, we haven't had, I guess, to see if what would happen if there was a large amount of notes going bad and having to take them back. But I think, and the good thing is, if they did, because rent growth is still enough, I think, where he bought them at a good basis. Even if rent had stayed stagnant, he could take it back and rent it and make money, because his bases were just unbeatable. We're talking like 15, 20, 25K for a house.
Wow.
So his
Okay.
margins were so good that even if the note did become bad, he could get
Yeah.
the property back and do
He
it
could
all
take it
over
back.
again. And even at a lowered value, he could still make his money. So I
Right.
think basis also was, what saved a lot of things, even if there was a big recession right after he had started buying these properties and selling them as notes.
Okay. So his path was he was getting into multifamily in LA. And then when he moved to Dallas, it was a distinct shift to single family, buying single family in bulk.
Yeah, exactly right. Really due to the fact that
The
you think
economy,
about
the
the
timing.
economy, the timing, but also the fact that he just didn't want outside investors. I think
Okay.
he had experience when you're buying these larger assets. He had had some distress in the 90s and 80s. He'd rather just doing it himself, have all the equity, not have to work with a ton of outside partners. And so it was really more of, I think, also just a lifestyle that he wanted. He didn't want to be a boss, like be bossed around by other investors.
Okay.
And it does limit your growth though, right? So there are certainly
Right.
ups and downs, which I think is why we are transitioning back to a different strategy. But I
You
understand
are.
it from his perspective, because he was, during this time he was in his, 50s, 60s. So he's getting towards the end of, his life, as it turned out to be, but also to the point where he didn't want to deal with the hassle of investors. He was okay just branding himself. And I think now that I'm in a certain different age gap and wanting to be more aggressive, I understand the risks of having investors, but as you understand the trajectory that you can put yourself on if you can provide investors great returns and you can build a much greater and bigger company.
Right. How did he deal with asset management? It seems like when you have a portfolio like that, you need really high quality asset management, and those who don't do it well can get into a mess.
And I think particularly for properties in lower income or higher crime areas, you don't get a lot of people that want to manage properties. So even
Right.
if we wanted to hire a third party person, it probably wouldn't go so well, because they don't want to manage in that area. They're going to charge a way higher percentage of revenue because of the extra work it takes. So I think that was a smart strategic decision at the beginning of buying these properties in 2005, to say we're going to manage everything in house, because he understood that dynamic of how much you're going to give away if you hire somebody else, and can they even do a high quality job? Will they
Right.
care enough about the residents to do a high quality? So it's certainly, I think, finding the right people that are not afraid of property management. That everybody talks about some of the property management horror stories. Well, I tell you, it kind of doubles and triples when you get into some of these areas, especially
Sure.
back when it wasn't so hot as it is now in some of these areas of Dallas. There was times where, I could do a whole podcast on some of the stories that I've heard and even that I've experienced myself. So I think it's been good for us to make sure we have a handle on things, but also
Yeah,
just not getting shaken by things that happen in property management.
sure.
Understanding that it is what it is, and just having the steel to manage it and problem solve.
How did your family step into property management? Was it a family member that spearheaded it? Was it your
No, it's
father?
all the credit goes to my dad. He hired good enough people at the beginning, and then as
Okay.
we kind of grew, we
Yeah.
just continued to hire great people, and although they're the lifeblood of the business, they do a great job managing it, and we've made sure that over time, and that's really been one of my priorities too, is making sure that we have our key performance indicators, that we have constant feedback from our residents, so we kind of have a pulse on if we're doing a good job managing the properties, how our tenants are feeling, and constantly looking for ways that we can improve in our processes. So I think just it started with just him understanding it from a business strategy standpoint, that it was important to manage in-house. And then really me, I've taken it more of an active role in figuring out how can we be not just managing the properties, but being a top manager in the space,
Right.
in this area, and really setting ourselves apart from other operators by our property management expertise.
And in times like we're in right now economically, the shift is away from the value growth of these properties. It's, how well can you manage them when they're difficult? In because of the choice that you guys made to do property management in-house, did you end up selling off all of the other assets you owned that were either in California so that everything was consolidated and manageable?
Yeah, we sold out of California now, and so really all of it's focused on the DFW area. And I think
Everything is there. Okay.
we still want to focus on dominating this market before moving out to other markets. Just because, I mean, if you're in Dallas Fort Worth, why would you go out to
Right.
other markets?
It's
It's
a
the best.
vast and diverse market
That's
itself.
right. Yeah, vast is the word for it. I mean, I don't
Vast
think
is
people realize how big DFW and the surrounding cities are. There's so much opportunity still to be had.
right, right. That airport alone is it's
It's its own little
enormous.
world,
You
right?
can't even see the end of it. Like if you're on that
Yeah.
tram.
It is a big airport, and they're building another terminal too to make it
Oh,
even bigger.
really?
So next time you
That's
come over here,
crazy.
you'll see just how much bigger it's gotten too.
Yeah, I had never been to the Dallas Fort Worth airport until maybe 4 months ago. And I was like, oh my God, this place is, I
Yeah,
thought LA
LAX is pretty
was
big.
big. It's enormous. Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's crazy. It's literally as far as your eye can see
Yeah,
is the airport.
and that's
Um,
just a good symbol for how Dallas is as a whole, right? It's a big place.
right, right. Yeah. So can you talk about like how have you diversified off of that core model that you had?
Yeah, so we have obviously the single family notes that we talked about. That was our original model, but since then, we really have acquired a lot of single family rental properties. And I think we've diversified and by going to other counties around Dallas. So we have our core business really is in the southern Dallas sector. But beyond that, there's a lot of different tertiary markets around Dallas that are seeing appreciation. So we continue to acquire assets there. And then obviously in the multifamily space, as we look for properties, we're really looking at a large 100-mile radius around DFW because of how the growth is really expanding outwards in all directions. We understand that. And so we're not just looking in DFW, but really looking in the surrounding areas that will take advantage of DFW's overall population growth. So doing that, we have a couple other investments that are not multifamily or residential based. So we have a couple industrial investments. We're getting into the development space as well, new
Development.
build,
Okay.
single family homes. So we have our hands in a couple different buckets, but I think it is important to focus on your core business, which for us is that value add multifamily single family space.
Yeah. Great. Great. I like that. That's kind of what I do as well. And what our company, Quantum Capital, does is, yeah, that always been doing value add. And like your father, it was born of, just a lack of funds. So
Yeah,
you buy the cheapest thing and they're always heavy value adds. And,
that's right.
but it works. It's a great model. And as you've commented on throughout our conversation that, there will always be a demand for affordable housing and, even the roughest properties, like all you got to do is fix them up if you've got good asset management skills.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, basis can save a lot of things. And if you can combine getting a property at a good basis with good property management, asset management, you have yourself a winning company, right?
Yeah, a great basis. Yeah, how did you state that? A great basis forgives a lot of
A lot of sins.
mistakes down the road.
But then
A lot of your sins.
if all the stars align and you have a good basis, that's where you see nirvana for investors,
Right.
which is what we're all going for, right?
Which we're all going for. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. Well, cool. Let me see. What is your biggest challenge, would you say, right now?
I think for us, deal flow has been kind of tough, as I'm sure
Yep.
for a lot of people. It's just trying to, make sure that we're underwriting correctly. Insurance prices have just skyrocketed. Premiums have just, you underwrite one thing one month, the next month you realize your underwriting is outdated. So it's just making sure that, we're not being too aggressive. I think we haven't had a lot of deal flow this year, like most people haven't, because of the bid ask spread due to high interest rates. But
Right.
also, like, I think, the insurance and taxes in Texas specifically make it really hard for things to pencil, because you're this person's selling it at a certain cap rate, but for you, as you're underwriting your year one pro forma, it's so different than what they're getting on the insurance and taxes side. So it just makes it harder for deals to pencil. So that's been our biggest challenge, as I'm sure it has for you and many other people. It's just finding good deals is always a challenge.
Difficult. And yeah, we have some properties in Austin, maybe like 5. And the mill rate, yeah, the taxes are deceptively tough in Texas because they have such, favorable taxes for the rest of, the people that live in Texas, but they
Yeah.
hammer real estate investors.
So no state income tax, but I guess they got to make up for that
Yeah, they
somewhere
got to
else,
make
which
up
makes
for
it
it.
tough.
Everybody's got to make up for it somehow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tough.
What's like would you say are your best habits for you and for your family's operation that have brought you the most success?
Yeah, I think personally for me, I'm sure a lot of people do this. It's time blocking, and I think that allows you to focus on what's the most necessary task to get done. So that's really, over the past couple of years, changed my ability to be more productive and prioritize important tasks. And I think from a company standpoint, it's the same thing. We actually recently implemented the entrepreneurial operating system. I don't know if you've heard of
Okay,
that one
EOS,
before.
yeah.
EOS, yeah. So implementing that has really helped us as well in our company be able to understand each person's role, understand our weekly and monthly goals, understand they call it rocks, which is kind
Right.
of like your most important priorities to get done over a quarterly basis. So doing that, I think, has been really important. It's allowed us all to understand our role and how we're contributing to the overall mission of the company, and which is not to be confused with the overall goal of the company, right? If you're saying the goal is to acquire X number of units, well, I think we're rallying around the vision of the company, which is to provide, social impact opportunities to increase our ability to impact the world and provide investors good returns. That's what we're going for. And then you're kind of rallying the company around that one singular vision, and not necessarily focusing as much on that 1,000 unit goal. Because if you do all the right things in the smaller buckets and in the short term, right, you do the right things on your goals for the week, you do the right things for your quarterly rocks, you're kind of focusing on your one department and mastering that, then all of those things will feed into eventually you accomplishing those major
Bigger.
goals and accomplishing your overall vision. So I think anybody that has a chance to read about EOS, read about Traction, which is the book it's based on, I would recommend doing that. And I think that can be really helpful for your business, even if you're just a one-person show. It's been really helpful for productivity and for understanding your personal and company vision and goals.
Yeah, that's I have not used EOS. I would like to on our company, and we've discussed it. But yeah, if you get a good integrator, did you have an integrator with you?
Yeah, we don't. I don't necessarily have a set integrator that we didn't at the time, but we do have somebody now that we're kind of all working to get into that position. I have to work to get into the visionary position better, and then the integrator has to work to get comfortable in that integrator position. But you see the progress, which has been good.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, we could talk off the podcast about this because yeah, our company is seems so broken up into, the visionary and the integrator. And we've benefited enormously from having both of those. But, we're looking into EOS, and, I'm sure they've been able to, help you guys move forward with their system. I think we're going to try to explore that as well. Yeah, this has been great. This is really fascinating. I love the family aspect of it. The how intentional you guys are, and you and your family, about, what you invest in and how you invest. Are you ready for our question round?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Let's do it. All right, here we go. The book you've recommended most over the past year?
Traction, definitely, by Gino Wickman.
Okay.
Wickman, that's right, for EOS.
Yes. Do you have a favorite quote?
My personal favorite quote, as being in the housing, it's from Maya Angelou. I believe it's stated as, an ache for home lives in all of us, a place where we can be safe. And that, to me, talks about the vision of what we're doing as a company, which is to provide a housing that makes people feel safe. Every other thing in your life kind of starts with the foundation of having a home.
I love that. That is so cool. I got to write down that quote. Maya Angelou. Cool. Is there an online app or tool that brings you the most value?
I really like Asana. That's been really a game changer for us. It's kind of an extension really of this EOS and this goal setting. It allows you to be really accountable for all your tasks for yourself and for your employees. So it allows us to kind of see in real time what our tasks are, and I can also see what everybody else is working on to make sure that we're all keeping each other accountable on those tasks. And it assigns the task to the person. It also sets a timeline, which allows you to make sure all the dots are checked. And so if something doesn't get done, somebody's going to tell you, hey, what's going on with that task? So it's really just a tool to implement accountability across your company.
Cool. When are you happiest?
Probably happiest, spending time with my family at different sporting events. I think that's when we're able to kind of, as much as I love real estate and business, spending time with people that are also passionate about college football and being there with your family, those are some of the happiest moments for sure.
Yeah, that's funny. And I'm sure if you live in Texas, that
how it is. I grew up in Texas, you had to be a football fan. So.
Right. Lastly, how can listeners reach out to you?
Yeah, so follow me on LinkedIn, Jordan Da Silva, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, but also visit our website at www.webcityequity. That's WEB as in boy, CITY equity.com. And you can subscribe to our newsletter to get weekly and monthly updates on what we're doing.
Cool. This has been great.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time, Mark. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, you as well, Jordan. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. Thank you for joining us for the Wild West Real Estate Show. If you like what we're attempting to do here, please subscribe so we can continue sharing these with you. And if you want to check out our website, it's quantumcapitalinc.com. You'll find podcast episodes as well as multifamily properties we're looking at and how you could potentially participate. Look forward to seeing you guys soon on the Wild West Real Estate Show.